forward now. Okay. Now, you can see this is a model that represents simple diffusion. Now remember, simple diffusion doesn't work for everything to cross the cell membrane. Not everything can get across the cell membrane this way. That's why we say that a cell membrane is semi-permeable. Semi-permeable means it allows some things to cross and keeps others out. Okay? So, how does it do that? Well, that's what we're going to look at in model 1, which is simple diffusion. Now, if you look at this setup, this dotted line down the center, that dotted line down the center represents the cell membrane. Okay? It represents the cell membrane. Then you've got particles on the left side of the cell membrane and particles on the right side of the cell membrane. Let's say the right side is inside the cell and the left side is outside of the cell. Okay? We're going to go through model 1 together. So please make sure you're filling this out as we go. So if I look at model 1, okay, how many different types of molecules are shown in the model? And I want you to type your answer into chat. All right? Type your answer into chat. How many different types of molecules? Another way to ask this question would be, how many different shapes do you see? Okay? 10 seconds. Make sure you're sending your answer. Okay. Okay, so correct answer is 2. Now, a few people said 3. So what are the 2 molecules? For those people who said 2, what were the 2 molecules? Matthew? Okay, you've got some molecules that are triangles and then some that are circles. So that's 2. For people who said 3, which other molecule were you, or what other part were you calling a molecule? So for people who said 3, what did you have as the 3 parts? Oh, the arrows. Okay. So the arrows are not actually particles. The arrows are representing which way those shapes are moving. Okay? Which is confusing. So that's good that we brought that up. So the arrows represent movement, and the particles are either the triangles or the circles. So there's 2 of those. Did anyone else have any other questions about what counted as a molecule? Especially people who said 3? Good question. So we said, does the line, the membrane itself, count as a molecule? Now remember, the cell membrane is made of lipids, and lipids don't dissolve in water. Okay? Now there's water on both sides of the membrane, but the cell membrane will not dissolve into it. So it stays as a separate structure. So no, it's made of molecules, but it doesn't mix in the same way as the triangles or the circles. Okay? Any other questions on number 1? What? Uh, this line? Yes, exactly. And so, like, let's say that you have to imagine that this line was like the boundary of the cell, like a fence. If you looked at it on a slide, yes, there is an actual layer of fat that you could actually see around the cell. Does that make sense? We're just representing it here. Like, it's like we zoomed in on a little piece of it just to make the model simpler. Okay? Great questions today. So number 2, count and record the number of each shape. So start on the left side, and I want you to try to count and see how many triangles are on the left side, how many circles are on the left side. Then on the right side, how many triangles are on the right side, how many triangle or circles are on the right side. So count those up. Takes probably take about 30 seconds. Okay, look up when you're done. You okay? All right, so let's come back together. Now, it is a little confusing because it's hard to keep track of where you started. So let's do the left side first. So how many triangles did you get on the left side? 14. Yes, that's what I got too. So 14. How many circles on the left side? 12. That's what I got too. Good. So 14 and 12. Now let's look at the right side. So on the right side, how many triangles are there? 0. None. Exactly. How many circles? Yeah, 12 or 13, depending on if you count this one that just crossed. So let's say 13. Okay, so you got 13 on the right, 12 on the left. Okay? Now, do you see how this model is slowly trying to point out features to us as we go just by having you observe it? So it's teaching you about cell transport without making you memorize facts necessarily. Okay? So that's the whole point of these pogos. Now, if you compare the triangle and the circle, which one is larger? Okay, so the triangle, right? Now, the triangle is larger than the circle. Then it says, describe the direction of the movement of the molecules in model 1. So now, go back to those arrows that you were looking at in the beginning. We said those arrows represent movement. So stop and think about what direction are those arrows pointing? Are they all going up? They're going where? Different. Sorry. Different types of, yeah. And okay, so Contagious said they're going different types of ways, all different, right? They're literally going every way possible. So remember when I said that particles are in random motion? That means they can move any direction. But you'll notice, like that triangle right here, they can go in any direction. But what happens if they hit something they can't get past? Yeah, they bounce back off, right? So that would happen when molecules bump into each other or when they bump into something like a wall. Okay? Let's say that cafeteria smell comes in the room. If my windows are open, it can go right out the window. Right? So maybe that smell won't last for very long. If I close all my windows, maybe the smell will last for longer. Right? Like if you burn something in the kitchen, what do? Open the windows and hopefully that'll get that'll let fresh air in and it'll diffuse faster and then the smoke alarm stops going off, right? That's why that works. You're adding in, okay, another thing into the mixture, okay, which is that outside air. Now, based on everything you've seen then, which molecules are able to cross the membrane? Which molecules were able to cross the membrane? Sheila? The circles, exactly. So the circles could cross without a problem, right? It looks like the circles are bouncing right through the cell membrane. So the circles might be something like water, okay? Water is constantly going to be able to move across the cell membrane, but the triangles were not, okay? The triangles were not. We're on question 5. So 3 was triangle, 4 was in all directions, because you can see they're kind of moving everywhere. And then 5 is the circles were able to move across the membrane. They could get across on their own. They don't need help. Okay? And then the last question. So if we left this system alone, okay, so we just let this happen and we didn't add any more molecules to it, what do you think would end up happening? And now what I want you to do to answer this question is look at our green food dye. What has happened now to our green food dye? So look at our green food dye. Okay, I heard a lot of correct responses. So how would you describe the green color? Okay, so it does get a little darker at the bottom, right? Okay. Has the green dye spread throughout the entire beaker? Yeah, right? That means that there was nothing blocking those green dye molecules, right? So it could spread through the whole thing. Is it spilling out of the sides of the beaker? No, because the dye can't move through the glass. So it's a barrier, right? If it could move through the glass, would you expect the dye to keep moving? Yeah, of course. Okay. But of course it can't. Now, if we apply that thinking to this model 1, will the triangles ever be able to move through the membrane? Are they ever going to be able to like change size or be? No, they're not. The triangles will keep moving, but they're never going to be able to cross the membrane. Now, what about the circles? What about the circles? Are they going to stop moving? No. Particles never stop moving. They're always moving. But now that they're kind of equally spread out, they're going to move back and forth relatively equally. So what you'll expect to see is that the concentration is always going to be about the same, like 12 or 13 molecules on each side, even though sometimes they cross back and forth. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, again, this simple diffusion only works for really, really small particles, okay? Particles like water or oxygen, okay? Carbon dioxide, things like that, okay? Now, yeah, question. No changes with the triangles, and then you just say the circles will keep moving back and forth, but the numbers will stay about the same on each side, okay? Now, this is simple diffusion, simple diffusion. Before we can move on to the more complicated types of transport we're going to talk about tomorrow, okay? Before we do that, okay, we have to talk a little bit about how the cell membrane is formed, okay? So we know that it's made mostly of lipids. So hang on one second, sorry. I'm just pouring out this dye so it doesn't stain the beakers. It's already staining my hand, so hang on. Okay. All right, there we go. Okay. So what we're going to do now is move on to Model 2. Model 2 shows us the cell membrane. Now, please listen carefully for this part. If you're in class, you're going to be working with a small group. If you're remote, I'm going to put you in breakout groups, breakout rooms, okay? I want you to work on questions 7 through 14 together, and I'm going to give us until 2:10. 2:10. So everybody look at the clock. How many minutes do you have? About 10, okay? Then at the end of class, we're going to go over these answers, and then every single person is going to submit them at the same time after we've gone over the answers. That means every single person should start the beginning of quarter 2 with an A+ in science class because we're doing this first one together, okay? Matthew. Well, they might change a little bit back and forth, like 12 to 13 or 12 to 11, but they'll stay relatively similar, okay? Because they can always move back and forth across. Okay, so I am going to put you guys into breakout rooms now. You have about 9 minutes, okay, to do this next part, and then we'll come back together, okay?
Wait, what question are we going to?
All the way to 14, so all the way to the end. Okay, so the rooms are opening now.